So welcome to today's episode of In Conversation with Reason to Be. I'm Aurea Fellows, and I'm also joined by my colleague, Keith Goddard. And this is the first of a series of 3 short podcasts, which all focus on healthy habits to support a good night's sleep. When it comes to getting a good night's sleep, it's really natural to think about perhaps what we do immediately before we go to bed. But what we do before that, in fact, quite a long time before that, can be helpful in terms of putting us on the front foot. So Keith, I know physical activity and exercise definitely has a role to play. So what would you say is most critical in that regard?
Lovely, thanks, Aurea. I guess we know physical activity and exercise is got loads of health benefits. But from a sleep perspective, I guess it's thinking about during the day, what can you do on a regular basis just to help you sleep later on. So I would start with just thinking about regularly standing more often, moving more often, and stretching more often during the day. So peppering your day with that. And that sort of falls into the physical activity bit. We know the benefit of physical activity with sleep. It reduces anxiety generally, it increases our mood, and actually gives us more energy. So trying to build more regular physical activity and exercise during your week is good. So, I mean, the government guidelines you can read, but generally, if you can do round about 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise during the week, that's going to help your sleep pattern as well as the other benefits. I think one of the other things to think about is to mix it up a little bit during the day or during the week. So do some physical activity, like I said, stand, move, stretch, but also walk, run, cycle, swim when the pool's open again. And try and pepper your week with something varied. What we do know is 1 50-minute session of moderate exercise is going to help your pre-sleep anxiety if you're someone that's prone to pre-sleep anxiety, and also some vigorous exercise. 10 minutes of vigorous exercise is going to help with that as well. I think that the thing to say is don't do too much vigorous exercise too close to bedtime. So try and get it during your day, and towards the end of the day, think a little bit more about some physical activity that's not too intense. I think the final thing to say about physical activity and exercise is get out more. So get out into the fresh air, get out into nature, and engage with that. So those would be my top tips on using it.
Yeah, I think that point about going outside is really something that resonates with me, Keith, because one of the things we know that has a massive impact on how well we sleep is how well we are sort of working with our natural circadian rhythms versus against them. So in terms of our biology, we know that the sort of master body clock in the brain is set by light levels. So actually, when we're exposed to light in the day does have a knock-on effect in terms of those circadian rhythms, which control lots of processes in the body and sort of that coordination around loads of different processes and hormonal patterns, including hormones that help us to sleep, like melatonin production. So we know that actually it's really important to think about what we can do to sort of boost our levels of melatonin, and particularly during the day, because that pressure to sleep that comes from having the right hormones at the right levels at the right time is very affected by when we're in daylight. And so if it's possible to be outside for a minimum really of half an hour at some point in the morning, that can be super helpful. So absolutely the whole kind of exercise, but also thinking about where you're doing it, so not entirely inside as part of that activity, I think would be really helpful. And that just also made me think about the link with vitamin D, of course, because we know that we can eat some vitamin D, but most of it comes from being exposed to sunlight, with the UVB radiation affecting the cholesterol under the skin and causing production of vitamin D. And that really only happens, obviously, for us in the UK at certain times of year, but particularly from April to September, making sure that we're outside at the right time of day, which is kind of around the middle of the day, for only about 10 to 15 minutes is all we need. But it's super important in terms of raising the levels of vitamin D in the body, which has been shown to have a really important role in sleep. We know it has a massive impact on lots of different elements of physical and mental health, much like exercise. But actually, we know it's involved in the quality of sleep that we can get if we have sufficient vitamin D. And even some really interesting research just recently coming out, linking vitamin D deficiency to some sleep disorders, things like sleep apnea, which, literally in the last couple of years, they've started to make some interesting connections there. So absolutely, I think, vitamin D as one of the nutrients is important in terms of whether we can get enough of that in the day.
Well, it's really interesting, because I think that the link I can see is that getting out to get your vitamin D first thing in the morning and then maybe lunchtime. But I think that links back to the physical activity bit as well. So regardless of sleep, there's a bit about getting out into the fresh air morning and lunchtime, have a bit of a walk. So that's going to top your vitamin D levels up, as well as give you a bit of physical activity as well. And I know as well as sort of vitamin D and other things, I've heard of magnesium being really important to sleep as well. And again, linking the two together, I know magnesium as well is important after exercise and physical activity. So it's one of the minerals that gets depleted quite quickly and needs topping up and stuff. So I think that, as well as your vitamin D, is important. And from what I understand, sort of eating foods like things like whole grains, nuts, leafy green leafy vegetables, all of those are going to help top up your magnesium as well. Is there any other sort of minerals and vitamins that we should be thinking about, or with regards to sleep?
Yeah, I mean, magnesium is an important one, Keith. As you say, it gets used up really quickly in the body because it's used in so many different reactions, including muscle contraction. So as you said, if you're doing a lot of exercise, need more magnesium. Also gets used up when we are feeling a bit more stressed. So it's very important, in terms of helping us to get those stress hormones out of the body. We know it plays a role in regulating melatonin. So we need plenty of it for lots of different reasons, but it's also about timing, because magnesium is used up very quickly, because it's used so much in the body. If we need to have enough to support sleep, we need to be making sure that we're getting enough of it later in the day, not just first thing in the morning, because otherwise we'll have used it all up by the time we come to need it to go to sleep. And I suppose the other mineral in that camp would be zinc. So it's another one of these really important, what they call trace minerals. So we don't need loads of it, but we do need it regularly, because we can't store it in the body, and it's used for, again, hundreds of different reactions in lots of things. But we know it plays a role as a circadian rhythm regulator. So back to that point about keeping all of the sort of hormonal aspects of sleep coordinated. And we know that it can affect the length of time that we're able to get sleep, but also it plays a role in making sure we're getting enough of that, what they call slow wave sleep, which is the stuff that really helps us to get deep sleep at the right times during the night. So all sorts of foods have zinc. It's quite easy to get enough. Animal sources, so things like meat and seafood and eggs, are probably the best available sources, because we can absorb those much more easily than from plant sources like nuts and seeds and lentils and beans, which have a reasonable amount of zinc but also have substances that stop us absorbing it quite as well. So if you are someone who is eating a vegetarian or vegan diet, you would probably need to eat 50% more zinc to get enough actually being absorbed from food. So I think in terms of key nutrients, they would be the ones to perhaps be watching out for in terms of the amount you're getting in the diet and when. But I suppose the other thing that occurs to me is also about just making sure we've got a good blood sugar balance throughout the day. So we're not having peaks and troughs in terms of the amount of glucose in the blood, and therefore an insulin response to control that. Because if that happens at night, if we have a drop in our blood sugar overnight, one of the things the body does to sort of prevent it getting too low is it has a release of hormones, one of which is cortisol, and that causes us to wake up. So one of the reasons that we wake up when we do in the morning is because we have a rise in levels of that hormone in the body. And if that rise starts happening at 3 a.m, because that's when your blood sugar is dropping, you will wake up much earlier than you need to be, and be disturbing your sleep. So on a bigger level, I think looking at sort of having foods that release their energy nice and slowly is important, and also not eating too much too close to bedtime. When you could, obviously, if we know that physically it makes us feel really full, if we're, it makes us it's uncomfortable to try and get to sleep if we've still got a very full stomach. So really, we want to leave a good 2 or 3 hours before we go to bed, after we've eaten our last meal, and for that not to be something which is going to spike our blood sugar, because that again could crash during the night and cause us to have disturbed sleep. So I think those are the kind of things. I think this whole issue of timing to me is a really interesting one. So it's not just what we do, as we've said, but when in the day we do it, just like exercise.
Yeah, that's really useful actually. It's food for thought, so to speak. What strikes me as well, I'm just sitting there listening, it's all very healthy and stuff. So I guess it would be remiss of us not to talk about maybe the less healthy habits we have around what we put in our mouth. So I guess, there's a lot of research around sort of caffeine, tobacco, alcohol, etc. So I think it's worth mentioning in the day really of how to approach that. And generally the received wisdom, I guess, is don't drink caffeinated drinks 3 to 4 hours before you want to go to sleep. But actually there's a whole body that says actually you should stop a lot earlier than that. And, some people talk around about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think part of it is I'm a bit of a caffeine addict, I have to say, so I'll hold my hand up to that. But what I've managed to do is try and find some nice decaffeinated coffee that I can drink in the afternoon, because I think I would miss my cup of coffee. So I think that there is a bit around just reducing caffeinated drinks. And I'm not a fan of things like peppermint teas or chamomile teas, so that doesn't do it for me. And I know my wife, she went decaffeinated tea a long time ago for other reasons, not necessarily sleep. So we know there's some good quality decaf stuff out there. That'll just help you get a better night's sleep if you look at reducing that during the day. I think tobacco as well. I think received wisdom is not sort of an hour before you go to sleep. But again, thinking about how much you're smoking during the day, and just the stimulus effect that tobacco has on you as well. Let's talk a little bit about alcohol.
We're going to have to at some point, aren't we, Keith?
Yeah, we are really. I think for those that know me, if I haven't got a beer or a glass of wine and I'm not functioning properly, I probably talk more when I drink as well. But I think there is a reality, a bit like caffeine really, is 3 to 4 hours before you want to go to sleep is the ideal. And let's be frank, that sort of scuppies your social life really, doesn't it? But actually one of the things is probably more about looking across your week. And, if you're drinking every day, 2 hours before you go to bed, an hour before you bed, it's going to affect your sleep. So I think there's just a bit about one, being reasonable and continuing to enjoy life if you like a drink. And I think part of it is, some people actually say, okay, well, the weekend, that's when I'll drink a little bit more, might therefore take a hit on my sleep. But if you've had good quality sleep, and we know catch-up sleep doesn't necessarily work, but, even think about things, well, yeah, I want to drink to relax or to enjoy or to be social because I've got friends around. Is a glass of wine, a beer with dinner, is maybe a useful compromise. And I think picking up on what you said, Aurea, about timings of dinner as well, some of that's absolutely crucial, along with maybe a glass of wine. I'm a big fan of just being practical, really, and saying, okay, well, if you've got children, you've got to put them to bed. What time are you eating? And maybe just think a little bit around that, so your week's balanced as well as trying to hit on a daily basis. And I guess the key point I would talk about all of those really is are you actually enjoying those things? So having a caffeinated drink, having an alcoholic drink, smoking, are you actually enjoying it, or are they just habit? So I think that's where I would end on maybe the less healthy food and drink that we put in our mouth.
Yeah, I love it, Keith, love it. I think you're right, though, that I think what's good to know is what impact things, particularly like alcohol, can have on our sleep, so that we can do it mindfully. Because sometimes we think that having a drink before we go to bed will actually help our sleep, because it often makes people feel like they fall asleep quicker. But actually the impact on the quality of our sleep during the night is the thing that gets impacted. And if you're doing that knowingly, as you said, maybe once or twice a week, knowing that for other reasons, that's what you want to do, at least you're going into it knowing that's the case, and knowing that you're doing other things during the rest of the week, that are sort of beneficial in terms of sleep. So so covered quite a lot of things there in terms of what we can do during the day that set us up for sleep. And I suppose our message, as always, is just to look at what's relevant for you, what's manageable for you right now, to pick one or two things that you can do to build new habits or to change old ones to support you, because there's lots of things that you can do to make sure you're getting a really good night's sleep. So thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode.